There are confessions that stop time. Moments when an entire studio, cameras rolling, lights blazing, audience holding their breath, freezes as if someone pressed pause on reality itself. This was one of those moments. And what happened next would become one of the most unforgettable episodes in Dr. Phil's 3-decade career. The woman sitting across from Dr. Phil wasn't supposed to break. She had come prepared, rehearsed, armored with a story she told for years. But sometimes the weight of a lie becomes heavier than the truth. And on that Tuesday afternoon, in front of millions watching, she let it all collapse. It was all a lie. 4 words. That's all it took. Dr. Phil's hand froze mid-gesture. The teleprompter kept scrolling, but no one was reading. The audience, trained to applaud on cue, sat paralyzed. Even the cameramen, veterans of thousands of emotional breakdowns, lowered their equipment slightly, unsure if they should keep filming. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. If you want to understand how one sentence can unravel years of deception and change lives forever, subscribe now, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. 3 months earlier, the Dr. Phil show received an email that would eventually lead to this moment. It came from a woman named Sarah Mitchell, 34, a mother of 2 from Ohio. Her message was brief but devastating. My sister destroyed my family with a lie. And now I need the truth to come out before it's too late. The show's producers had seen thousands of similar requests. Family betrayals, sibling rivalries, buried secrets. These were the raw materials of daytime television. But something about Sarah's email felt different. There was no drama in her words, no performance. Just exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying unbearable weight for too long. The story Sarah told was this. 5 years ago, her younger sister Emily had accused their father of abuse. The accusation tore their family apart. Their father, a retired schoolteacher named Robert, was investigated, ostracized by their small community, and eventually estranged from most of his children. He lost his part-time job at the local library. He stopped going to church. His wife of 40 years stood by him, but the stress fractured even that bond. Emily had become a victim advocate, speaking at support groups, building a following on social media. She had turned her story into a mission. And Sarah had believed her. They all had. Until 6 months ago, when Sarah found a diary in Emily's apartment. A diary that told a very different story. The production team flew both sisters to Los Angeles. They prepared 2 separate green rooms, standard procedure for potentially volatile guests. Dr. Phil reviewed the case filed the night before filming. He'd handled false accusations before, but something about this one unsettled him. If Emily had lied, she'd done so with such conviction that even trained investigators had found her credible. And if she was telling the truth, exposing her on national television could re-traumatize a genuine victim. Dr. Phil made a decision that night. He would trust his instincts. And his instincts told him something was about to break open. The morning of the taping, Emily arrived first. She was composed, well-spoken, dressed professionally. She'd done media before. She knew how to control a narrative. The producers briefed her on the format. Dr. Phil would speak with her first, then bring Sarah out for a confrontation. Standard reunion setup. What Emily didn't know was that Dr. Phil had already spent an hour with Sarah that morning, off camera. He'd read the diary entries. He'd verified details with family members. He'd consulted with forensic psychologists. And he'd made another decision. He wouldn't ambush Emily, but he also wouldn't let her hide. The show began normally. Audience filed in, applause signs lit up, cameras positioned. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage with his characteristic confidence, that mix of authority and accessibility that had made him a household name. He introduced Emily's story, a woman who had bravely come forward about childhood trauma, only to face skepticism from her own family. Emily spoke beautifully. She talked about the courage it took to break her silence. She described the isolation of not being believed. She looked directly into the camera and addressed other survivors. Your truth matters. Don't let anyone silence you. The audience was captivated. Several people were crying. This was exactly the kind of advocacy television was supposed to do: give voice to the voiceless, validate the invisible wounds. Dr. Phil listened. He didn't interrupt. He let Emily finish. And then he said, "I want to bring someone out who has a different perspective on this story." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. Sarah walked onto the stage, but she wasn't alone. She was carrying something. A worn leather journal, the kind with a small lock that had been broken. The kind that held secrets never meant to be shared. Emily's face changed the moment she saw it. The composure cracked, just for a second, but Dr. Phil caught it. So did the cameras. So did everyone watching. "Emily," Dr. Phil said, his voice lower now, stripped of television polish. "Your sister found this in your apartment 6 months ago. She's been trying to understand it ever since. And I think it's time we all heard the truth." Sarah didn't sit down. She stood there, holding the journal like it was made of glass. Her voice shook when she spoke, but she got the words out. "I wanted to believe you. We all did. But this diary. Emily, you wrote about creating the story. You wrote about how you practiced telling it until it sounded real. You wrote about why you did it." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Emily opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked at Dr. Phil, then at Sarah, then at the audience. For 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours, she said nothing. And then, finally, "It was all a lie." Time stopped. Dr. Phil stood up from his chair. He'd been sitting comfortably, professionally, but now he was on his feet. His hand came up, not in anger, but in a gesture that said stop everything. "Hold on," he said. Not to Emily. Not to Sarah. To the control room. "Stop the tape." The red lights on the cameras blinked off. The audience didn't move. No one knew what to do. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how these shows worked. You didn't stop production mid-confession. You didn't break the fourth wall. You didn't prioritize the human moment over the television moment. But Dr. Phil did. He walked over to Emily, who had started to cry. Not the composed, media-trained tears of a practiced storyteller. Raw, ugly, desperate crying. The kind that comes from a dam breaking. "Why?" Dr. Phil asked. No microphone, no camera, just him and her. "Help me understand why." Emily couldn't speak. She shook her head, hands covering her face. Sarah stood frozen, still holding the journal, tears streaming down her own face. The audience sat paralyzed, witnessing something that felt too intimate for public consumption. Dr. Phil turned to one of the producers standing in the wings. "Get the family therapist in here. And clear the audience for 10 minutes. This isn't a show anymore." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. The cameras stayed off for 40 minutes. What happened in that time would never be fully broadcast, and that was by design. Dr. Phil sat with Emily and Sarah, not as a television host, but as a clinical psychologist with 3 decades of experience navigating human crisis. Emily's story came out in fragments. She'd been jealous of Sarah. Sarah was the successful one, the married one, the favorite. Emily had felt invisible. And then one day, she'd seen how much attention abuse survivors received. How believed they were. How supported. She'd started with a small lie. Just testing it. And people had believed her. So she'd added details. Made it more vivid. More traumatic. And the more she told it, the more real it became in her own mind. Until she almost believed it herself. Their father hadn't abused anyone. He'd been a good man, maybe not perfect but good. And Emily had destroyed him because she wanted what she thought Sarah had: attention, validation, love. When the cameras came back on, Emily looked different. Smaller somehow. The polish was gone. So was the performance. She sat hunched in the chair, exhausted, like someone who'd been running for years and finally stopped. Dr. Phil addressed the camera directly, his voice measured and serious. What you've just witnessed is one of the most complex situations I've encountered in my career. False accusations of abuse are devastating, to the accused, to genuine victims who fight to be believed, and to the person making the false claim, who is usually suffering from their own unaddressed trauma. He turned to Emily. You need help. Real help. Not media attention, not a platform, but intensive therapy to understand why you felt this was the only way to be seen. Then he turned to Sarah. And you need space to process the betrayal. Your father needs to hear this. Your family needs a path toward healing. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 2 business cards. He handed one to each sister. These are the names of trauma specialists I trust. Emily, yours focuses on pathological lying and attention-seeking behavior. Sarah, yours specializes in family reconciliation after betrayal. You're both going to need them. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. Not a television moment. A human one. Subscribe and share this video. Because stories like this remind us that truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation for real healing. The episode ended not with applause, but with silence. The audience didn't know how to react. They'd come for entertainment, and found themselves witnessing something far heavier, a family's collapse and the beginning of its possible redemption. After the show, Dr. Phil did something else unusual. He asked both sisters to stay. He brought in his team of therapists and intervention specialists. He arranged for their father to appear via video call, with a counselor present. And for 2 hours after the taping ended, they began the work that couldn't be done in front of cameras. Robert Mitchell, their father, appeared on the screen looking older than his 63 years. When Emily saw him, she broke down again. I'm sorry. Felt inadequate, and she knew it, but she said it anyway. Over and over. I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. Robert cried too. But he also said something that surprised everyone. I forgive you. I don't understand it yet, but I forgive you. Dr. Phil later said in an interview that moment was why he did the show. Not the ratings, not the drama, but the possibility of redemption. The chance that even in the worst situations, people could find a way back to each other. The episode aired 3 weeks later, edited to protect certain details but preserving the core truth. The response was overwhelming. Victim advocacy groups wrestled with how to discuss it. Some said it would make real victims less likely to come forward. Others said it highlighted the importance of thorough investigation and support for all parties. Emily entered a 6-month residential treatment program. Sarah began therapy for her own trauma, the trauma of betrayal by someone she loved and trusted. Robert started the slow process of rebuilding relationships with extended family and his community. The journal, that leather-bound artifact of deception, was eventually destroyed in a private ceremony with the family therapist present. Emily said she needed to let it go, to stop hiding behind stories and start living in truth. Dr. Phil kept a photo from that day in his office. Not a publicity shot, but a candid moment captured by a staff photographer. The 2 sisters, sitting side by side after the cameras stopped, not touching, not speaking, but present. Just beginning. In the months that followed, Dr. Phil received thousands of messages. Some from people who had been falsely accused and felt seen for the first time. Others from people who had lied about trauma and needed help. And from genuine abuse survivors who said the episode reminded them why truth matters, not just their own, but everyone's. The business cards Dr. Phil handed out that day weren't just referrals. They were lifelines. And both sisters used them. Emily spent 6 months in treatment, learning to understand the trauma beneath her lies. Sarah worked through her own pain with a specialist who helped her separate her sister's betrayal from her love for her family. Their father, Robert, slowly rebuilt his reputation in his community, one conversation at a time. A year later, they returned to Dr. Phil's studio, not for cameras, but for a private meeting. The 3 of them sat together, not perfectly healed, but healing. Robert hugged his daughters. Sarah held Emily's hand. And Dr. Phil watched, knowing that this was why he'd broken protocol that day. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop everything and choose truth over performance. That's what Dr. Phil did. That's what Emily finally did. And that's what saved them all. Share this story and subscribe, because the world needs more moments when we choose honesty over comfort, and healing over hiding.